have said recently that the city's budget is unsustainable. What will you do if elected to help change that? And first, we'll start with Christy Wood running for seat 1.
Thank you, Hilo. Well, I think that's a fair question, but I in defense of the city and to let the taxpayers know, I want to be clear, for the last 7 out of 11 years, council's not taken additional property tax revenue. We worked hard to keep a lean budget, and we had 7 years with an increase to our levy rate. A 3% tax increase generates $767,000 in revenue. The cost for the new patrol vehicles this year was $322,000. That doesn't leave a lot of revenue left for other expenses of running a city. Our levy rate is very low due to the increased valuations and assessments, and it's likely, though, that our citizens will see no impact to their property tax bill. In addition, the state has promised property tax relief with the additional revenue they have collected. With the increase in cost to personnel and equipment, we just were not able to forego that 3% increase to the levy this year. But we have a good track record of doing it, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again. Our only option really was to cut personnel. And the largest department in the city that's fully staffed is the police department. And obviously with my background, I absolutely refuse to defund the police. Our police department, under the leadership of Chief White, has reduced crime in the city in the past 7 years by actually 64%. No other city in the region, and even right over the border, can say that. That means no homeless camps, no gangs, no graffiti, no open market drug trade, no excessive violent crime. We're an exceptionally safe city, and I feel the increase to our budget to maintain that was warranted, along with all the other community services. I think you get a good bang for your buck with the city of Coeur d'Alene, and our budget is not out of control by any means. We're just dealing with growth. And my time on council, we'll do everything we can to keep it affordable for our citizens.
Thank you, Christy. Next, we'll have Brian Winkler, also running for seat 1.
Sure. So as far as the unsustainable city budget, so the mayor just a couple of weeks ago acknowledged that it is totally unsustainable and something needs to happen. And so when I think about the city budget and the fact that property taxes were raised and they're going in one direction right now, the first thing you have to do is just get back to the basics. Just fiscal responsibility. It's a core principle of what I'm running on. So the mayor, he comes out and announces that we have an unsustainable budget, and yet the next day we're approving art projects that just don't really represent the values of the community. So that's one thing. We need to go line by line through the budget and see, just take out all the things that don't reflect the values of this community. Just get back to the basics, basic services, support our police, support our firefighters, do everything to support them and just, cut all the fat out. That's the first thing. The second thing, we're very constricted by state law. State law says we can, do certain things, we can't do certain things. So for example, we're not allowed to have a tax on the resort and visitors that come in when, that should be, it's common sense. So really the full burden of taxes is on the property owners in the city, and that needs to change. So if that means that, we have to go to our state legislatures, many of which I have a great relationship with, we need to do that. We need to lobby at the local level, and we need to push on our state reps and our state senators to, make some changes in state law so that we do have the ability to have policies that are just more common sense and friendly to the people who are invested in the community.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Next, Rob Knutson running for seat 5.
Well, this is a timely question. Today, there was a meeting downtown about renewing the impact fees, which haven't been touched on in many, many years. It's interesting that, although there is a fairly substantial cushion in unallocated funds in the city budget, I don't think the danger of going bankrupt like other cities in the nation, San Bernardino, Detroit, Stockton, just to name a few. But the sustainability question is interesting, and it's going to take a lot of work to get into those details and figure out a way to capitalize on one of our main industries of tourism. And so it is correct. I think there does need to be a focus on lobbying the state to figure out a way to get funds to help sustain the budget in a more long-term way. It's unfortunate that the tax increase went through. I would prefer to have taken a stronger look or a more detailed look at the spending as it is. I think we were able to save $167,000, but I'd like to see those details, and I think that would be worth pushing through in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll have Roger Garlock.
Thank you. Yeah, this is very timely. The budget has grown extensively, and it was our mayor that used the term unsustainable. So, that has definitely made the rounds in the public. When you're looking at the growth compared to spending, there's been a big difference in how quickly each one is. As the population grows, the spending has grown twice as fast. So when 82% of your budget is personnel, and I'm not suggesting that we cut, such as Christy said, no, that's not something we would do. But it's been 19 years to be exact since impact fees have been raised. So 2004 was the last time, about a year after I moved here. So we've missed out on 2 growth cycles in that time. 2008, we had a boom of $1 million homes continuing to sell. We've always been in a little bit of a bubble when it comes to growth as far as the appraisals of those homes. And then since COVID 2020 to 2021 and 2022, it's been extensive. And so those impact fees really could have made a difference on our police department, which as of a couple of years ago wasn't at full staff, and it's now currently at full staff. So when you look at the spending, we really got to be creative. Go through it line by line. We got to look at nonprofit agencies that are taking advantage of taxpayers. We have to look at subscription services that are continual expenditures. We have to take a look at, maybe as simple as gas and cars going home with personnel. So it really needs to be dug into pretty deeply at this rate, because we can't continue to have a burden of tax increases on the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we will have Dan Gookin running for seat 3.
Thank you, Hilo. So I voted against the property tax increase. I can always find something to cut in a budget. And this year was no exception. We had $1 million in cash that came in through our annexation. And I did make a motion to use that money to offset the property tax increase. Thank you for this, Christy. But the rest of council did not agree to that. They would rather see $1 million or $700,000 sit in the bank at 4% interest than give it back to the taxpayer. There's also lots of other nickels and dimes throughout that budget. And if you attended the budget hearing, and I thank those few candidates who actually did, you would know what I offered for cuts. I've been looking at the city budget since 2005 when I first started showing up, and know where the money is. It's in there. I really regretted that the mayor said that it was unsustainable. We can work it out. The problem is sometimes you just have people who are willing to work on the city council, and I am willing to work for the taxpayer. I sat out here as a private citizen for years and watched them frustrated because I read the budget and I knew where the money was to cut. There's always money to cut. There's always money in the budget. There were some things, if you watch the budget hearing, I said, well, why haven't we raised this fee? I've been pushing them to raise impact fees for 10 years now. There's other fees that we can raise. There's a lot of things that we can do from the state. And I got to tell you, the state is going to provide property tax relief this year. We don't know what it is yet. And you get your property tax bill after the election. But that's not an excuse for council people to be lazy and not look for cuts in the budget. And I will continue to do that for the next 4 years after you elect me, Dan Gookin, seat 3. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. We're going to try Dan English one more time. Dan, do we have the audio challenges worked out?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Dan, why don't you take a minute to also, since you didn't have the opportunity, introduce yourself, tell us why you're running, and then go ahead and field this question. So you'll have 3 minutes. Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Well, my name is Dan English. I often get asked if I'm related to the English funeral homes, and yes, I am. My Uncle Don started them, then it was my cousin Bruce, and now his son Eric. I was born and raised here. Before me, my parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents were here. And now my children are here, our grandparents and 2 great-grandchildren are here. We are truly a multi-generational North Idaho family. I was raised with an ethic of hard work by my father and a mother with a great love for poetry, the arts, and folk art. I grew up in a spirit of charity from my parents and examples of faith from my attendance at Trinity and Christ the King Lutheran, celebrating long-term commitments. My wife, Coy, and I just celebrated our 50th anniversary this spring. The property tax in the budget balance, if you look back over our history of the last decade or something, there have been a lot of times we didn't take the 3%, we only took part of it. One of the things, I truly don't have an answer why we have not taken a hard look at the impact and annexation fees before now. That one just kind of astounds me. And as we learned at our workshop today with the Planning Commission, if they had just indexed them for inflation along the way, we would have been much better. But in the current budget, it has taken a large increase, and a large reason for that is because of the contractual agreements we have with our bargaining units in the city. It's tough, everybody knows, it's tough to attract and keep employees, and you've got to reward them. They're the most valuable assets that the city has. And so police and fire and all of our other workers, we had commitments we've got to honor. I'm comfortable with the budget. I certainly do my homework. I've never really known a council member that didn't do some homework on it. So anyway, I think, we'll always be looking for ways to cut, but sometimes we're going to be in a deeper ditch than other times. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And the last candidate on this question will be Clark Albritton.
Thank you. In the last budget hearing, it was brought up that by the time the issue comes up in the council meeting and the public hearings are held, all we see is the top level finished product. And we don't have the opportunity or the ability to go with a hearing that has a deep dive analysis of where the year-over-year cost increases are exactly, line by line. Yet in a business, when you manage a business, that's exactly what you do. And if it goes for department by department and you go to every line, you review what those expenditures are, and you determine what are those drivers, what exactly is driving the budget increase on a year-over-year basis, that we would go to that extreme difference. And yes, in the big numbers, there's not a lot of play in the personnel, especially in fire and police. I mean, these are critical services and they occupy the vast majority of the budget. But when it comes to those elements that can be scrutinized, they should be seen and they should be reviewed in detail. And the public should have the opportunity to have those hearings, not a delivered product line by line. In addition to that, it was brought up, I'm not an expert in this area yet, since I'm not a professional politician and haven't been on the city council, but for those that are, it's been brought up to me that there are elements of state legislature taking full values of local tax that we should be earning pieces of. One was mentioned last night and something that was attended by other members on the gas tax. So I think both sides of this need to be looked at. Where is there opportunities, obviously impact fees, and is there legislative relief that we need to be fighting harder to get some local share that we're not currently getting from some of these other taxes, of course, the resort tax. But when it comes to a budget perspective, if we want to retain and preserve the personnel that matter, we need to find those elements of opportunity in the expenditure that we can cut and have hearings that reveal what those details are.